The great motivational speaker Zig Ziglar used to ask, which compliment would you rather hear? You look like the first day of spring, or you look like the last day of a long, cold, terrible winter. Think about it for a moment. There's not a lot of difference in time between those 2 days, but a world of difference in what people will think about you. In a recent campaign, Greyhound focused on the destination. Reconnect with family, reconnect with friends. This was their end goal, was to look at what happened when you got to where you were going, nothing about the ride or your journey getting there. On the other hand, Megabus, what do they focus on? Free Wi-Fi, comfortable seats. They focus on the journey or the process of getting there. Both of them are bus companies. Both of them will take you from point A to point B, but they position themselves differently. And that's essentially what we're talking about here, is how do you position your product, service, or company in a way that makes sense and matters to your either current or potential customers. There are 3 big steps that you have to go through in order to figure out your positioning. The first one is to determine your niche. Where do you want to fit? What is unique and who do you serve? Trying to find out that little slice of where you want to live or where you want to talk about what's important. You can't be all things to all people all of the time. You just won't have enough money. So it's much better to pick a limited, more focused approach. Secondly, you want to figure out, why are you unique, or how are you unique? How are you different than your competitors? Just like the bus companies. One's talking about the destination, the other's talking about the Wi-Fi and the experience riding the bus. Maybe they are exactly the same. Maybe they are only slightly different. Doesn't matter. It's what you decide you think is important, and then you're going to talk about it, especially if it's not talked about by your competitors. You're looking for a way to stand out. So if they're all talking A, you've got to figure out how to talk B. And then thirdly, you have to figure out how to leave an impression. Just because you say you're different doesn't really matter. How do you really stand out? How do you pick something that is so exciting or so different or so meaningful to your target audience? That's leaving an impression. So it's not only figuring out what it is and packaging it and creating that niche and all of those items, you have to also figure out how to penetrate their thinking, their mindsets, so that they actually understand and are paying attention to who you are and what you're offering. There are 6 challenges that most organizations face when figuring out how to position themselves. And as an example, I'm going to use Catholic grade school education. First step is identification. Who are our direct competitors? Well, of course, it's going to be public, because that's available for every student in your particular community, at least in the United States. So that's going to be a competition. You're going to have other private schools. Maybe they're religious based, maybe they're not, but they're going to be certainly competitors. Then you're going to have homeschool, which is an option, or even online cyber schools. So you've got a lot of direct competitors that a parent needs to think about, and you're trying to figure out, why would they want your offering versus one of these other offerings. The second thing you have to do is figure out your competitors and their positionings. So what are we thinking about for public? Well, it's for everybody, or we're a good school district, or our rankings within the state, or some other type of item. Unfortunately, a lot of public schools in major metropolitan areas are generally failing schools. And that's actually a good thing for private schools like Catholic schools, because it's a good alternative for parents who don't want to send their kids to the public school who isn't doing as well. The private schools, however, maybe they're talking about their alumni or how successful their graduates are or how long they've been around. So there's a lot of ways in which the competitors are thinking about their positioning, and you also have to do that with your particular approach. Besides what everybody else is doing, the third thing is understanding what your positioning is. And many organizations don't know, or they need to create one, or they need to do research to understand why people are buying their products or services. It's not always obvious. So in a Catholic grade school situation, what are we looking at? It's usually twofold. One is the perception of really strong, good quality academics. And so there's great test scores, the students are doing well. In fact, 60, 70, 80% of the students in many cases are 1 or 2 or 3 grade levels ahead of their particular area. So if they're in 2nd grade, they're performing as a 4th grader, something like that. So that's a proof on academics. But there's also faith-based. And so it teaches students to be characters of good quality. Teaches them about their religion and so forth. So that's very important to many families, especially that grew up with the Catholic faith. Now, not everybody that goes to a Catholic elementary school is Catholic. That's fine. But when you talk about the positioning, it's one of those two things, or both, the academics and the faith formation. Then the fourth item is the comparison between the two, between what your competitors are saying they're good at and what you think your strengths are. And how do you talk about them? Well, there's a concept called parity and differentiation. So parity is where you're the same. Well, we both have small class sizes, we have really qualified teachers, we've got great field trips, whatever. All of the schools are doing the same stuff there. Then the differentiation are what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're really different at. And so you may have things like in the Catholic school one, we teach our students how to be great learners of their faith and how to respect that and so on and so forth. If that's a differentiator that you think's motivating, then that would be how you would define yourself. But the point is to look at the competitors, to look at yourself, and then figure out where do we have an opportunity to stake out something that's unique, and we can bet our reputation on it, and we can say, hey, this matters to people, and they will buy our product or service because of what we're talking about. Number 5, we need to make a decision. Your prospect needs to make a decision. And so even though you're talking about all of these things, what really matters? Can they get it down to a decision? And so as we've been talking so far, it's great academics and developing people of faith or characters of faith. And given today's world and all of the problems that are going on and challenges or issues, that's pretty motivating to a lot of parents. Rather than doing it on your own, you've got a whole support group that's helping you do that. So it's usually some combination of those two, academic excellence and faith excellence. And then finally, number 6, you have to figure out the implementation. What's going to be your tagline? What are all of the different things you're going to say on your website? What's the literature? These are all things that matter in terms of actually communicating that positioning. So in a public school district near where I live, their tagline was pretty straightforward. Big enough to matter, small enough to care. Say that again. Big enough to matter, small enough to care. So what are they talking about there? That they're a major school district, but they are also small enough that they can handle individual students and give them the attention they deserve. And fortunately for me, and where I live, and children's neighborhoods and so on and so forth, that school district continues to be ranked very, very highly in the state of Pennsylvania. So that tagline has remained, and it's kind of ingrained in everything they do. Once again, there are 3 steps here. The first step is going to be the segmentation. So we look at who it is we're trying to attract. Now, for the Catholic grade schools, think about that for a moment. They're expensive. So not that there are scholarships and so forth, and if somebody really wants to go, they'll find a way. But in most cases, they're looking for affluent families, or at least higher middle class. Typically, they live in the suburbs or they live in the city in bad school districts. And the parents are by and large Catholic and want that education. So that's my segmentation. That's who we would want to go after if we were trying to market to this particular group with that positioning. Secondly, we look at what is the competition and how do we talk about that and how do we continue to implement against that. So we're saying that, hey, we've got excellent academics and we're building these great, really strong characters, people who are going to be great members of society. So we're starting to implement that positioning by talking about how what we're doing matters. And then the third step, of course, is the messaging. How we continue to talk about that? How do we show that? Looking at anything from our social media to our website to everything, really constantly trying to reinforce that message. And so why I keep pushing on all of this is because of this problem. Most companies' greatest challenge from a branding or positioning perspective is their inability to say what they do and who they do it best with. You can't be all things to all people. So get specific, find somebody, and then say something that matters. That's really the trick that we're going after, and we've got to keep saying it over and over and over and over again. That's what we're after. One way to think about this positioning, even a little bit more sophisticatedly, if you will, is to use something developed by Philip Kotler, who was a professor that has written a number of books and articles on branding. And he calls this the brand resonance pyramid. And what's interesting about it is you start at the bottom and you work upward. So at the very base level is something called salience. It's the question of who are you? And so we would look at things like which brands fit into this category, or how frequently do you think about these brands? Is it something you think about every day or only occasionally? How far are you into this thinking? Then we'd go a couple other categories. The next level up is performance. So that's things like how well does it satisfy a basic need? What is the willingness to recommend this product? Is it credible? Was it innovative? Do you like it? What about how unique is it in terms of a particular brand? Those are all things that are rolling through people's heads when they think of performance. On the flip side is imagery. To what extent do people admire and respect this brand? Do they really like it? Are they wearing it on their shirts or their clothing? Are they thinking about it? Are they proud to be associated with it? What places and how many people offer this brand? That would talk about how ubiquitous it is. Then we go up a little further and we get into ideas like judgment. What's that? What's the overall opinion of it? What's the value of this brand? Some considerations that they're thinking about. How unique is the brand? And then we come to the other side, which are feelings, which are, does the brand offer any feelings of warmth or fun or excitement? Basically, do you get people's blood going a little bit when they think about the brand? Do they get excited about it? Do they like it? Do they forget how horrible their day is and they start thinking about how great it is to interact with this particular brand? And then finally, we end up with something called resonance, which is what about us? So we started with who are you with the brand, then we went to what are you, defining it, then we went to what about you, and now we're going to what about us? How do I see myself interacting with this? Am I all tangled up in there? Am I feeling better about who I am and what my situation is. And do I actually love that brand? Do I have some really strong personal feelings about it? So these are ways that we can really start thinking about what brand we want to create and the actual positioning. This may seem like it's easy and we can do it in a few minutes. It's actually very difficult. And trying to find out what is the unique part that really matters to our customers is key. Then once we set that, leave it alone. You want to keep doing the same stuff over and over and over, having the same message over and over and over. If you think about it, BMW, the ultimate driving machine. That's a tagline that's been around for decades. Decades. It's survived multiple advertising agencies and so forth. It's still the ultimate driving machine. And so that's what comes into people's heads, because if we change the tagline or the branding every couple years, well then some people know about it, some people don't, and it's just big confusion. So that's why it's so critical to get all of your branding set first with your positioning and then stick to it.